chapter 1, and I have it marked with a bubblicious bubblegum wrapper. So I know that's the right spot. Genesis 1. And this is something I didn't plan on, it just happened. But yet, it's one of those things to where you just kind of go with the flow. You know, image of God. Who was created in the image of God? Man, we were. And this is a Sunday that we celebrate our memorials. You know, the ones we've lost, whether it be last year, even years to go. You know, that's why we try to help and give a little bit for the cemetery. You know, so that we know the resting place is taken care of. You know, because why do we have resting places? Do we often think about what that means? You know, as a kid, what was it? R.I.P. Yeah. You know, I would watch Looney Tunes. You know, and there'd always been those tombstones that they have rip on them. And for years, I couldn't figure out what rip was as a little fella. And then I finally figured out rest in peace. But do we often think about that? What's it mean to rest in peace? You know, that means for us, as the ones left behind, that we lay aside all the things that we had against somebody. Let them rest in peace. Let those bygones be bygones and let it be. Just as much as we think that in the positive. You know, and I was thinking that, mulling it over in my mind as I was taking circles around the yard mowing on the mower and thinking about, you know, how do I respect my grandparents or my dad or things of that nature as I think and ponder over them. Do I let them rest in peace with my worries? You know, and it brings me back to God. How, I don't know, but my mind travels in circles. Sounds like the racetrack I've been hearing for the last 2 nights. But when I think about God, it says in Genesis 1 that He made us in His image. So, what is an image? Anybody else? Well, old man's got it right, but y'all didn't hear him because you wasn't listening, or I wasn't either, hardly. What is an image? What's a picture? It's a likeness of something, isn't it? If I show you a picture or an image of something, you can get the gist of what you're looking at. You can't touch it. You can't feel it. Maybe you can feel the picture. You know what I mean, but yet the reality is if that real being there is not real, that's not it. But you get an idea of what it is. So we are the picture of God. And oh my goodness, are we not doing a good job, are we? No. And I'm sorry to say that because I know I'm not. And I'm not saying that to belittle or be hurtful, but really when we sit back and question ourselves, am I projecting myself in such a way that people see me as an image of God? There are days I have some good moments. There are fewer than my bad moments. But that's just honesty, and that's human life, though, isn't it? Because we stub our toe, don't we? You know, when I walk around the garden in the mornings, when I walk my path with the hound dog in the morning, there's certain spots I go slow. I was 50 yards from there yesterday. You know what? I come across another cactus. Boy, I got to go slow again, another spot. And I lost it. So this morning I'm going around in my circle and I can't find it. I don't know where it was. I knew I seen it the other day. I'll find it one of these days. Found some rose thorns the other day. But as I ponder that and I go around and I'm thinking about these things that I'm seeing and I'm feeling, you know, even in that moment, how am I projecting God? Well, I don't often think about that. You know, am I projecting it as in somebody sees me thinks I'm crazy going in circles in the field, or the fact that I'm talking to God the whole time? Or putting out my worries, or, you know, visiting with Him and thinking about my family members that I'm consumed of and worried about. And so that's what I do. I'm going to read to you 1:26. It says that God said, let us make man in our image. Why would He say us? Exactly. Because we believe in our Christian faith and the way the doctrine speaks to us that He is one of three, right? Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So He said, let Him make Him in our image after our likeness. So let's take a snapshot of us and we'll make human beings. Why? Because He wanted to express Himself. He wanted us to be able to live a life and live it in such a way that we express God's love through us. And He says, let them have dominion over the fish and over the fowl and over the cattle. So, we know Ron's doing a good job of being like God. He's got cows. And he says, in all the things over the earth and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So let us have dominion. Dominion doesn't mean dominance is in a way that we can corrupt and we can pervert and we can take advantage of. That's not what it means, does it? It's like tending to a garden. There's times, sure, you got to pull weeds. You know, I was looking at my cucumbers the other day, and I've got 2 or 3 spots where I've got half a dozen plants come up in one little hill. And what do I need to do? I need to pull the weak ones, don't I? Because if I don't, they're just going to choke out and not make anything because of myself. So I have to garden and take that dominance and do what I think is best. And that's a hard place to be, isn't it? Because God does that in our own lives, doesn't he? Because there's times that you can have a church overflowing with people and realize that it's just a bubbled up mess, that when you empty out the bucket, you ain't got much in the bottom hole, you got soap suds on the top. We've ever done that, haven't we? Where we got a thing of dishwater and there ain't much in there but bubbles. Well, sometimes churches are that way. He says in 27, he says, so God ended up, he said, let's do this. And then God created man in his own image. So we get that picture that we are a picture of God. And in the image of God created he, him, male, and what? Female. And he created them. So God separated us into male and female. And he created us. And 28 adds, and he says, and God blessed them. And God said unto them to be what? Fruitful and multiply. So to be fruitful and multiply, what do we have to do? Number 1, we have to grow. Number 2, we have to bloom. We have to come in season. We have to be pollinated. And then we have to put forth fruit. So we could do a whole Bible study and separate those things and say, okay, am I in a growing stage? Because some of us are, aren't we? Some of us are just purely in a growing stage. It doesn't matter age, it doesn't matter financial standing, or it doesn't matter, you know, all these things. It says, are we in a growing stage? Okay. Next one would be, are we in a flowering stage? Because right now, I don't know about y'all, but there are certain things in my life where I felt like, okay, I've been growing. I've been trying and actively trying to grow. Maybe I got some new leaves. Maybe I got some wilted ones still falling off, you know. But now there's things and questionable things in my life, and I'm thinking, okay, if I looked at it, it's not a bloom to where I'm open up and flowering, but yet I've got little buds. I may have some little buds nurturing, and I'll tend to those buds. And it could be anything. It could be a friendship. It could be a relationship with someone else. It could be my own relationship with a book. You know, because I don't know about y'all, I like to read. And so I've been reading some different books that I've had suggested from friends, and one of them been hitting home. You know, it's a guy that went to a Buddhist monastery, and he's talking about stories. He's a Christian, and he went over and studied time on these things, and he's telling me how he would sit and eat, and how these monks would actually have to do their what do they call it, alms in the morning and go bum food off people. And he was telling me stories in this book that, you know, he was going to this one place and this sweet old granny come out and give out her few little handfuls of rice because that's what she had. You know, and he said, you know, looking at that compared to Scripture and how it brings things to him. And so I see those things. And so in that moment, I may be budding out. And then after that, I don't bet y'all, but I feel Brady is a pretty good bloom. Because what do you see in Brady and his little family? He's bringing forth more fruit, isn't he? You know, God, be it one of these days, you know, a long time from now, Brady may be behind the pulpit if I can talk him into it. I don't know about y'all, but I'm going to try my best. We may have to grease him up a little bit to squeeze him back there, but it'll be all right. But how do we look at our own selves about fruitfulness? And then the fruit that we have. I don't know about you, Miss Lola May, you got a lot of fruit in this church. There's been a lot of blooming from this little lady. And you think about that, you know, the members that we've had for years and how we've grown. Sure, there's times where we go down, but yet, what are we in right now? Maybe it's fall. Maybe our leaves are just kind of dying back a little bit. You know, there's a maple tree at Grandpa's that I go out every morning and pass it as I go to the garden and check and see how things are doing. And I regret trimming it in the wrong time. I trimmed it by the moon that was right. Yearly, though, I trimmed it wrong time, and it's kind of dying back a little bit. And I'm worried about it. So every morning I go out there, Mister, I'm sorry. Sorry I had to do that to you. I hope you come back. Why? Because I hope for fruitfulness. I hate pruning things, but sometimes we do. You know, so sometimes in our lives, and why we're studying this today, is sometimes our hearts are pruned back a little bit, aren't they? And why do we prune back? So we can have new growth and regrowth. Because you'll go out there, and Grandma's got an old, what are those little crab apples? And I trimmed it up pretty good through the fall. And it looks kind of gnarly and looking under it, but when you really look at that tree, it's beautiful. And I realize, and I think about, you know, Pop cut it there because it's got an old scar, and I know that's when he trimmed that tree because it got hit by a truck. You know, or things of that nature, and I look at that. And so in our own lives, in our churches, today as we memorialize and remember the ones that went before us, we start seeing, okay, well, how's this overlay God's image? Because the people that were here before us, what did they do? They showed God's image in our church, didn't they? You know, even the ones in our country, you know, the servicemen and women. How did they serve us? Who serves us in this book? God does. Our brother does, doesn't he? You know, you don't have to take her out of here. I like hearing it. That just means we're having fruit.
I do too. Yes.
So it's one of those things that as we have these things in our life, that fruitfulness, we know we're going to die back, don't we? It's not fun though, does it? It still hurts. My God, does it ever hurt? One of these greatest things I can show you is like this book right here. This book was given from my grandpa to Beverly. And I think it was 02. It's in here somewhere. And so as I preach from a book that's from a dead woman, and I think about it, two of the finest people that I have ever met in my experience on this world has touched this book. For one, my pop to donate it and give it in dedication to a woman that he loved and appreciated. And then the fact that the woman that I love and appreciate, who loved on me as a grandkid, and even though I'm not her own blood, was that book. And I don't know about y'all, but that holds a lot of memories to me. You know, just as much as how many of y'all have books and Bibles of your loved ones that you miss? I got a whole stack of books from my grandpa. You know, I've got a few things from my dad and friends that have went on, and I've got old books from, you know, married in families and things like that. And how do we memorialize them? So how do we, and I ask that question again, how do we ourselves memorialize and show our fruitfulness of the time spent from our brothers and sisters in Christ and our family members to live on? It's how we act, how we treat others. I don't know about you, I'm not always good at it. Because there's times that I flash back and think about Pop telling me to get my temper under control. Whew. I had a moment this week. I had a moment. Just so you know, your preacher has moments that I fully pulled away from somebody. And I don't often have to do that. And I pulled away and I said, I'm going to walk away because I'm getting hot-headed and neither of us need to be hurt, so I'm going to take a break. Turned right around, come back, had a conversation, and it was all good. But it took that moment of me walking away to let my little steam whistle blow off because I'd had enough. And that was one of those moments that, okay, can I be upset at it? Yes. I can nitpick myself and say I didn't do right. But yet I can also remember Pop's words and say, take a break, walk away. Just like me working on stuff. You know, as a kid, I'd get frustrated with something. You know, I'm not one to get mad and throw something. I just get upset. And when I'd get upset, you know what happened? I'd cross-thread a nut or a bolt or something. And Pop would tell me, go take a break. Go get you a drink, come back to it. And sure enough, that's all it took. Just walking away for a minute and come back, and I'd reset. And I'd come back to the problem, and I could do it right then. You know, and there's times like that in our world that we're not patient with us. And knowing that we're God's image. We're not perfect like God is. We're not the perfect God. We will never be that. We are just His image. We are His likeness to shine and show love to others. And I hope that we can see that in our loved ones. Because there's so many things, you know, like Grandma sent me with money for the, yes, thank you, for the cemetery. You know, why? Because she's got a mama there. Because she's got a husband there. She's got loved ones that live there. You know, and I say that, please don't take that literal. But that's what she did. You know, she wants to show that respect and kindness and pass that on. Well, little she can, she does. You know, there's times where we do that. Like this week, I took first fruit out of my garden to somebody. Had a little bag of radishes. Boy, it looked pitiful, but I was proud of it. I was tickled pink. I can share it with a friend. And it's one of those things to where we push on and we send our fruit and we send our love on. Now this was kind of a short sermon. I didn't realize it was going to be that short. So I'm going to ask you a question real quick. Let me find it. I meant to ask you this morning and I got sidetracked. This is our study guide book. Let's see here. We are in Genesis chapter 1, the image of God, and the question. Okay, one of the questions they asked us is how is us, being that we're the image of God and we're created differently, how are we different than animals in this world?
Because God put us over the animals.
Exactly. And so in ourselves as we're very much animalistic if you watch people, aren't we? You go sit in the field and you watch deer. Can you tell the dominant buck when it walks out? Oh yeah. You'll see some little teenagers running around causing trouble and doing their thing. But you'll notice, and the same is true with a pack of dogs, won't you? You'll see the one that has respect and the one that doesn't have respect and things like that. And so when you really look at us though, God put us over the animals. So what did he give us to use as dominion over the animals? We all have one. Starts with an S, ends with an O. We have a soul, don't we? We have a spirit. We have God living inside of us. And that's something that we need to be using and reflecting on. Let me think about this. Okay, this was the piece that I was wanting us to see. And I got sidetracked on. So how do y'all plant your gardens? Do you just go plant them willy-nilly, or do you pick out a day? And if you pick out a day, what I'm asking is what day and how do you pick that day? You don't have to get deep and tell me that if you plant in the signs of the loins of the moon, that it'll put nodules on your potatoes. I think that's what Foxfire book. I'm trying to quote that book and I hadn't read it in a while. But we often look at the moon and the stars, don't we? And they did in the biblical times too, didn't they? Because, when you think about it, the story of Christmas and Jesus, how did they know where Jesus was? By a star. And God says that in Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything and there's a sign for everything for us to see and know and understand where we're at in life. And so if we look at those things, and we have two main dividing things in Genesis, and we just missed that part of Genesis. We have two sources of light that give us guidance. 3 if you add stars. But what are the two main sources of light? Sun and the moon. But which one produces actual light? The sun. Because the moon does what? It reflects. And we have to remember that as images of God, aren't we? Because we're not the sun, are we? We are more like the moon. We reflect God in his image. And that's how we see that in our memorial today with our loved one. Questions or comments about First Genesis? Now, if y'all want me to pray real quick for food,